It's mid July 2010, and Steve Green is flying from Oklahoma City to the United Arab Emirates. Since 2004, Green has been the president of Hobby Lobby, a large American chain of arts and crafts stores. He is visiting the Gulf state with his consultants to meet three people, one a local and two from Israel, at a hotel in Dubai. The three contacts are antiquities dealers, here to show off samples of their extensive collection. Despite the fragility and age of their precious cargo, the three keep their booty packaged haphazardly in plain cardboard boxes. They remove a series of ancient artifacts and lay them out on the floor and on a coffee table for Mr. Green and his consultants to peruse. While we don't know what was said, we know Mr. Green left satisfied, and the Israelis proposed to not only sell him the artifacts he had seen, but a vast trove of over 5,500 cuneiform tablets, clay bullae, and cylinder seals. Mr. Green doesn't immediately take them up on their offer, but instead flies back home to Oklahoma for further consultation. He is not taking this potential purchase lightly. Now, you may already know something about where this story goes from here, and don't worry, we'll get into all that. But this debacle is much bigger than any one antiquities collection, museum, or legal case. If you're like me, when the allegations that Hobby Lobby had purchased stolen antiquities made headlines in the mid to late 2010s, you were probably less than sympathetic. After all, Hobby Lobby brings in a lot of money, the Green family is quite wealthy, and they can afford to do their due diligence. And it doesn't help that half their company's Wikipedia page is just its controversies section. At the same time, no matter how villainous you may imagine Hobby Lobby's senior executives to be, the story of how priceless cultural heritage makes its way out of an archaeological site, into the hands of an antiquities dealer, and eventually into the hands of an American businessman is not a simple process, and when it goes wrong, it requires a lot of bad decisions, human errors, broken legal systems, and ignorance to let it get that far. If a craft store chain can take advantage of this system, how often do others do the same? And if we can make any headway in understanding this system, what can those of us who are not billionaires or cabinet officials do to address it? But before we can get into that, we need to understand what all has gone down in the decade and a half since this story began. Steve Green and Hobby Lobby have been collecting antiquities since 2009. The Green family are well known as devout Christians, and Steve's collection focuses on artifacts related to the Bible and from biblical times in the Middle East. As their collection grew, so too did interest in Green as a potential customer. Word soon spread among the antiquity dealer community, and Green started being approached by anyone who had anything that might satiate his jonesing for some biblical era artifacts, including some of which had never been formally studied or even authenticated by archaeologists. Candida Moss and Joel Baden wrote in a 2017 New York Times op-ed that Green's collection alone, quote, dramatically expanded the market for biblical antiquities in the late 2000s. In 2010, Green registers a 501c3 nonprofit to turn his burgeoning collection into a new Museum of the Bible, which is to be built in Washington, D.C., just a few blocks from the National Mall in the U.S. Capitol. In the summer of that same year, Green takes his trip to the UAE with his consultant. According to a 2017 court filing, in late August, that consultants traveled to Israel and again met with the same two Israeli antiquities dealers. The two dealers reportedly wove an extensive backstory for the collection, saying that nearly all of the 5,500 plus artifacts had been bought in the 1960s by the father of a third Israeli antiquities dealer and then brought to the United States in the 1970s. They provided Green's consultant with the contact info and address of someone in Mississippi who had allegedly been in possession of the artifacts in the decades since. The collection had then allegedly been sent from Washington, D.C. to the UAE for Steve Green's inspection the previous month. While this story later turned out to be a lie, there is no indication that anyone at Hobby Lobby looked into or attempted to contact the person whose info they had been given by the dealers. At issue here is the question of provenance. Provenance is the line of ownership, paperwork, and other evidence that substantiates the origin, authenticity, and legality of a piece of artwork, or in this case, ancient artifacts. Ideally, you should be able to establish when and where an artifact was originally excavated, whose possession it came into, and how it moved from their hands into your hands, and what laws and protections it was subject to along the way. If you can't establish provenance, you run the risk that your purchase could be either illegally obtained or an outright forgery. Tied into the question of provenance is the issue of pricing. Objects with impeccable provenance can fetch higher prices as owners can be more confident that their collection isn't going to be subject to repatriation efforts or unexpected seizures by customs agents. Meanwhile, dealers who know there are problems with the provenance of their goods would, at least hopefully, have a more limited market, although, as we will see later, this isn't necessarily the case. At his meeting with the Israelis, the consultant finally gets their price, $2,091,000 for all the artifacts. The consultant believes the collection could be appraised as high as $11,820,000, but suggests negotiating down to a price of just $1.6 million. About a month after Green's return from Dubai, a Hobby Lobby lawyer contacted Patty Gerstenblith, a law professor at DePaul University in Chicago and an expert on cultural heritage, to assist in the due diligence around the potential purchase of the Antiquities collection. That October, Gerstenblith provided Hobby Lobby with a memorandum outlining the situation. The memorandum tells Hobby Lobby, quote, "I would regard the acquisition of any artifact likely from Iraq as carrying considerable risk. An estimated 200 to 500,000 objects have been looted from archaeological sites in Iraq since the early 1990s. Particularly popular on the market and likely to have been looted are cylinder seals and cuneiform tablets." Speaking to The Guardian in 2015, Gerstenblith recalled, quote, "I read them the Riot Act. I explained to them how the system worked in the interest of trying to discourage them from doing anything illegal. I knew they were building a collection, so I was concerned they might be doing something they shouldn't, even out of ignorance of the law." Nevertheless, on December 8th, 2010, Hobby Lobby had their deal. The collection their consultants assessed could be worth nearly $12 million was theirs for a grand sum total of $1.6 million. But who sold it? Was it one of the three antiquities dealers from the meeting in Dubai? Well, no. The official invoice for the sale lists the third Israeli dealer, the one whose family supposedly brought the collection to the US in the 1970s, as the official seller. Remember, Steve Green never met with this dealer, nor did his consultant. In fact, to quote the Eastern District of New York complaint, no Hobby Lobby representatives or agents had ever met or communicated with Israeli dealer number 3. And yet they were sending this person $1.6 million. Or were they? When Steve Green signed off on the purchase, he authorized the $1.6 million payment to be wired to 7 different bank accounts. 3 of the 5 owners of these 7 accounts were the 3 dealers from the Dubai meeting, but none were the other Israeli dealer, supposedly the official seller. And that's not even the end of the eyebrow-raising aspects of this deal, because despite the artifacts allegedly being stored in the US and displayed to Green in Dubai, the invoice lists the country of origin as Israel. I guess they just trusted this other Israeli dealer so much that they took their word that Israel was where their family had got the artifacts in the 1960s, again despite never meeting this person, but still not enough to directly wire the payment for the artifacts to them. Apparently, this last point didn't sit well with the dealers either, because 2 days after Green signed the purchase order, they asked to have one of the Israeli dealers whose name was on the order replaced with the ostensible sellers. And with that, on December 15th, 2010, the deal was done. The artifacts were ready to make their way to the US, where, remember, they were already supposedly being stored somewhere in Mississippi. Before we look at how the collection eventually made its way into the hands of Hobby Lobby, let's take a brief tangent and look at the role of Israel and the UAE in the antiquities market. Antiquities, and specifically illegal or looted antiquities, are unusual goods to try to trade and market. Unlike trying to sell illegal drugs or running arms to a paramilitary group, there's a significant profit incentive to try to make your products appear to be legitimate and legal even when they are not. Lyndall Pratt and P.J. O'Keefe created one framework for understanding this process in geographic terms, dividing countries into 3 stages. The first is archaeologically rich markets, countries which supply antiquities to the market and where looting may be widespread. Second are transit states where those goods attain their veneer of legitimacy. And finally are the destination markets where the artifacts are put on display in a museum or a collection. The middle stage, transit states, can be broken into 2 categories: geographically advantaged states and art market states. While both kinds of states may turn a blind eye to the potential import, sale, and export of illicit antiquities, art market states tend to be farther from the source of the goods and house auction houses and art fairs that allow ill gotten goods to be laundered. Think places like Belgium and Switzerland. Meanwhile, geographically advantaged states tend to be much closer to the origin of the antiquities and can act as regional hubs where looters and dealers from neighboring countries can bring their goods to be laundered and sold for profit. Israel and the UAE are prime examples of these sorts of geographically advantaged states. Dealers who source their artifacts from unstable and weak states like Iraq, Syria, and Yemen can bring their finds there with little hassle from local authorities, and yet both countries have good enough reputation in the West and with other wealthier countries to provide a veneer of legitimacy over their sales. Buying from Israeli and Emirati dealers in Dubai just feels less sketchy than, say, going to a militia group in northwest Syria to decorate your den. Plus, as we saw earlier, these sorts of dealers will have the resources to come up with somewhat convincing paperwork and forged provenance to make sure their goods seem all the more legitimate to potential buyers. And so, on November 23rd, 2010, the Emirati dealer sent Hobby Lobby the first shipment of artifacts. And no, you're not misremembering. That is before the payment and even the agreement that Hobby Lobby would be purchasing the collection were made. Well, that's okay. The label on the box just says they're sending ceramic tiles. And if that's the case, it's probably not worth all that much. Certainly not enough that it needs to be declared on a formal customs entry, and thus, no customs entry was made. 4 days after the deal was finalized, the Emirati dealer sent three more packages of the artifacts, again labeling them just tiles, sample. Again, no customs entry was made for the package, and this time, no country of origin was listed. While this first delivery was addressed to Steve Green and his executive assistant, as the packages continued to arrive over the coming months, they were addressed to Hobby Lobby, and also Mardell Incorporated, and also Crafts Etc., two affiliates of Hobby Lobby also based in Oklahoma City, the former of which is run by Steve Green's brother Mart. Was this just a decision Green made to make sure he wasn't getting a bunch of valuable boxes delivered to his front door? No. In fact, it was the dealer in the UAE who requested to send these shipments to at least four different recipients in the same city. Why? Well, to quote the EDNY complaint, the use of multiple shipping addresses for a single recipient is consistent with methods used by cultural property smugglers to avoid scrutiny by customs. Now, to be fair, not every single package Hobby Lobby received just got labeled sample tiles. In fact, one shipped by one of the dealers in Israel was accurately labeled as containing 1,000 clay bulle tablets, but again lied about its country of origin, plausibly listed as being Israel, and including a declaration of provenance completely different from the one that the dealers had given to Hobby Lobby. So, was there any evidence that this was raising any red flags at Hobby Lobby HQ? Well, in December 2010, about a week after the sale was formalized, the Emirati dealer told Green's executive assistant that shipping rules had changed and asked if the rest of the packages should be shipped via FedEx. Again, quoting from the EDNY complaint, Green's assistant responded, quote, "As long as you keep the value of each package under $2,000, they will not have to forward it to our broker to clear it through customs." So, if this was raising any alarms at Hobby Lobby, it certainly doesn't seem to have been enough to give them any pause in continuing the shipments, even knowing they couldn't ship the whole collection at once without gaining unwanted attention from the US Customs. To make matters worse, these packages were worth over $2,000, even being sent piecemeal. So, how did they get around this? They just changed the invoices and shipping declarations to say that the boxes of sample tiles were worth $250 or $300 in total. These shipments continued via FedEx throughout December and into January 2011. On January 3rd, FedEx was processing a package en route from the UAE to Oklahoma City at its shipping center in Memphis, Tennessee. The package purported to contain a sample of 50 handmade clay tiles valued at $5 apiece for a total value of $250. In reality, Hobby Lobby had paid $14,020 for this package alone. It's not clear what drew the attention of U.S. Customs and Border Protection to this package in particular, but attention was drawn and the customs agents detained the package for further inspection. Over the next 2 days, four more packages, one later valued at over $84,000, but again claimed at just $280.40, arrived at the Memphis facility and were detained by customs. All of these packages claimed a country of origin of neither Israel nor the United Arab Emirates, but instead Turkey, a country, as best I can tell, never discussed as an origin by any of the dealers up to this point. Spoiler, they were from Iraq. On January 19th, Customs officially seized the packages, at that point including over 500 artifacts valued at over $146,000. The jig, as they say, was up. A few months later, the CBP informed Steve Green of the seized packages. Hobby Lobby then petitioned CBP to release the seized artifacts, sending a statement to Provenance they had received from the three dealers, the one saying the collection was from an Israeli dealer's family and had been stored in Mississippi for several decades. They also sent a separate statement of Provenance written after the seizure, covering only the 5 packages seized at the FedEx facility and saying they were owned by the dealer in the UAE. The authorities were not won over by the apparently conflicting provenance statements and refused Hobby Lobby's petition. At this point, the investigation got underway. The story had not been made public yet, and Steve Green continued to amass his collection from other sources. The same month Hobby Lobby is informed of the seized deliveries, they announced plans for the Museum of the Bible publicly for the first time at an event at the Vatican Embassy. Side note, the official name for the Vatican Embassy in DC is the Apostolic Nunciature to the United States, which ever since I first heard it, I've thought is just a great name. It wasn't until over 4 years after the fact, in October 2015, that Candida Moss and Joel Baden broke the story at the Daily Beast that the Green family were under investigation for the illicit importation of cultural heritage from Iraq. Carrie Summers, the president of the Museum of the Bible, spoke with Moss and Baden and recounted the situation to them as, quote, there was a shipment and it had improper paperwork, incomplete paperwork that was attached to it, and further suggested the artifacts were merely, quote, held up in customs. Remember, the artifacts had been in custody of CBP for over 4 years at this point. For his part, Steve Green also spoke with Moss and Baden in 2015, saying in part, quote, is it possible that we have some illicit artifacts? That's possible. It wasn't until July 2017, just a few months before the Museum of the Bible was set to open to the public, that the U.S. government filed for the civil forfeiture of what they declared to be illegally smuggled antiquities originating from Iraq. As part of the legal back and forth, the defendant in the case was not Steve Green or Hobby Lobby, but rather the Antiquities themselves, leading to the hilariously named legal case of United States of America v. approximately 450 ancient cuneiform tablets and approximately 3,000 ancient clay bullae. I hope they got them all tiny jumpsuits for their court date. As a result of the forfeiture, Hobby Lobby agreed to turn over all the artifacts they had received from the 3 dealers Green had met in Dubai and pay a $3 million penalty. The day the agreement was announced, Hobby Lobby released a statement in which Green says the company, quote, should have exercised more oversight and carefully questioned how the acquisitions were handled, and that the company is pleased the matter has been resolved. The statement goes on to say that, quote, the company was new to the world of acquiring these items and did not fully appreciate the complexities of the acquisitions process. Hobby Lobby imprudently relied on dealers and shippers who, in hindsight, did not understand the correct way to document and ship these items. The thing is, though, as we've seen, the dealers and the shippers did very much understand the correct way to document and ship smuggled artifacts so as not to be caught. Remember, they requested to have multiple addresses to ship to. Hobby Lobby reminded them in turn that, as long as they keep each shipment under $2,000, they wouldn't have to get it cleared by customs. And even if we give Hobby Lobby the benefit of the doubt that they didn't know that the dealers were labeling the packages worth over $84,000 as being worth less than $300, they can do the math. They know how much they paid for this collection, and they know how many packages they're receiving from the dealers that they've paid $1.6 million to. And personally, I'm a little incredulous that Hobby Lobby didn't know exactly what the dealers were doing with these shipments in order to avoid customs as it was happening, although I should emphasize they've never been charged with any criminal wrongdoing on this matter. Regardless, Hobby Lobby hands over the collection to the U.S. authorities to further process and eventually return to their home countries. But there's still a big question, actually a couple big questions, but let's start with this one. How did the Emirati and Israeli dealers get this collection of Iraqi antiquities? Fortunately, one possibility that was speculated, that they got it from the ISIS terrorist group, is almost certainly not the case. Although ISIS did profit from selling smuggled antiquities, these artifacts left Iraq years before ISIS began its major expansion in the mid-2010s. Since the dealers themselves have never been taken to court, we don't have their side of the story. However, there are some hints from the artifacts themselves about their place of origin, and they take us to a real-life lost city. Using a database created by Spanish archaeologist Manuel Molina, Eckhart Fromm, an archaeologist brought on by the Department of Homeland Security to examine the collection seized from Hobby Lobby, started to notice some patterns. He noticed the artifacts he was looking at bore many similarities to other antiquities seized from smugglers, antiquities associated with the long-lost Sumerian city of Irisagrig. Apologies to any Sumerians listening on my pronunciation there. While the location of Irisagrig is unclear, we do know from the tablets in Molina's database that it took 4 days to tow a boat there from the city of Umma, another ancient Sumerian city whose location is known to be in the northwest of Iraq's Thikar Governorate. This fact also gives us some indication of how and when the Hobby Lobby artifacts might have been looted. According to Palestinian-Canadian journalist Jane Araf writing for NPR, quote, Umma itself is one of the most heavily looted of all known ancient sites in Iraq. Thieves dug hundreds of holes into the tells, the mounds under which the ancient city is buried, after a security collapse following the 2003 U.S. invasion. Across all Iraq, and particularly in the south where Dhikar Governorate is, looting increased after the 1991 Gulf War and then exploded after the U.S.'s 2003 invasion. Perhaps most infamously, even Iraq's National Museum was ransacked by looters as U.S. and coalition troops failed to protect important cultural and historic sites, and as many as 5,000 cylinder seals taken to be sold on the black market. One possibility is that the collection Hobby Lobby had bought originated in the chaos following the U.S. invasion as many looters scoured whatever sites they could get access to, both known and unknown to archaeologists. And this really underscores some of the damage this underground market does to our knowledge of history. Even if we know the name of the city where some or all of these artifacts originated, once they were unceremoniously taken away by looters, our ability to study that place is irrevocably damaged. Even if archaeologists find Irisagrig, where these artifacts came from, whose houses they were in, what historic layer they came from, how they related to other objects at the site, is probably knowledge that will forever be lost. From Irisagrig and wherever else the artifacts originated, they may have passed through several other hands before reaching the dealers who sold the collection to Hobby Lobby. Because the whole network is operated outside of any legal framework, it's difficult to track who exactly might have come into contact with them. But if you want some idea of how this stage of the process works, Chris Hubie and Heidi Awij at France 24 did a great piece of embedded journalism following some of the low-level antiquity smugglers taking goods from northern Syria across the border into Turkey. I highly recommend giving it a watch. So, there we have it. The US invades Iraq, looters take advantage of the situation to raid archaeological sites, some of the spoils of their looting potentially ends up in the hands of dealers in geographically advantaged states like Israel and the UAE, who see a billionaire ready to spend mad cash on antiquities, and Hobby Lobby goes ahead and buys the collection despite red flags popping up left and right. Case solved? Well, it would be if Hobby Lobby didn't then go and do almost the exact same thing again a few years later. In 2014, Hobby Lobby bought one single artifact, the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet, from British auction house Christie's for $1.67 million. Unlike the last set of artifacts, the backstory and provenance of the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet is relatively well known. At roughly 3,500 years old, the tablet is considered one of the oldest surviving works of literature and one of the oldest religious texts according to the Associated Press. In 1853, it was found in the ruins of the library of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal at Nineveh in modern-day Mosul, Iraq. Then, in 1991, amid the First Gulf War, the tablet was looted from an Iraqi museum. By 2001, it was in the possession of Jordanian antiquities dealer Ghassan Rihani, who lived in London. Rihani was the former head of the Jordanian Antiquities Association and had allegedly been a major player in Jordan's market for trafficked antiquities, some of which he allegedly purchased from Iraqi soldiers. In 2003, an unknown dealer purchased the tablet and other artifacts for just $50,000 and smuggled them to the United States. By 2007, the tablet had an entirely fraudulent provenance following it around, claiming it had been in the US since 1981 and had been sold at an auction in San Francisco. At some point, the tablet ended up at Christie's auction house. When Christie's attempted to verify the provenance presented to them, they seemed to have realized something was amiss, because they decided the tablet was probably not fit for a public auction, merely a private sale, a sale that would presumably draw less public attention, even if it drew a smaller price. Christie's went ahead and sold the tablet to Hobby Lobby in 2014, 3 years after Hobby Lobby had had its order from the UAE seized, despite neither side knowing the true provenance of the piece. This in turn led to Homeland Security investigations seizing the tablet in September 2019. 8 months after the seizure, Hobby Lobby sued Christie's, alleging the auction house had not done its due diligence before selling the tablet to Hobby Lobby. In a statement to Eileen Kinsella at ArtNet, Christie's stated the lawsuit was, quote, linked to new information that had come to light regarding an unidentified dealer's admission to government authorities that he illegally imported this item, then falsified documents over a decade ago in order to perpetrate an illegal sale and exploit the legitimate market for ancient art. Christie's further told ArtNet, quote, now that we are informed of this activity predating Christie's involvement, we are reviewing all representations made to us by prior owners and will reserve our rights on this matter. Assertions within the filing that suggest Christie's had knowledge of the original fraud or illegal importation do not comport with our investigation. Obviously, I can't declare one way or the other who is telling the truth here, but it does seem notable to me that Christie's had decided that this tablet was not worthy of public auction and decided to go for a private sale regardless of what specifics they might have been able to find out or not find out about the tablet's true provenance. Hobby Lobby's case against Christie's seems to have been dismissed in early 2022, but it's unclear to me whether they may or may not have reached a settlement on that matter outside of court. At least as far as the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet goes, the story does have as happy an ending as could be reasonably hoped. The US formally turned the tablet over to Iraq in December 2021, and it now proudly is on display in Iraq's National Museum in Baghdad. Well, at least that's as far as things went. Wait, what's... Oh no. It happened again. It's not worth going into all the details on this one, it's basically the same territory we've already covered. The head of Egypt's Antiquities Registration Center, Hisham Al-Laythi, suspects the objects were illegally excavated and then smuggled to the US. Hobby Lobby had this collection since at least 2016, and it sounds like they found out the goods had been smuggled around 2019. They then entered into negotiations with Egypt and the Department of Homeland Security, fortunately resulting in the entire collection being returned to Egypt in 2021. Still, this is another 5,000 pieces on top of the 5,500 from the first case and the nearly $1.7 million Gilgamesh Dream Tablet. How much further can this go before they just go through their entire collection? To answer this question for themselves, the museum began an extensive process of going through their entire collection starting in around 2017 to find out just how much of their collection was not just potentially stolen, but even just completely fake. Jeffrey Kloha, who was brought on as the chief curator around this time, told NPR in 2020, quote, all we have is paperwork, and very vague paperwork, so I don't know if these were purchases sight unseen or if they were viewed before they were purchased. He continues, obviously there are multiple sources for items from Iraq over the past 30 years, so we have no way of knowing where these came from. They were purchased with scant descriptions. We can't even tell sometimes whether a particular item belonged to which acquisition because it just wasn't documented either at the acquisition point or at the delivery point. In addition to the 5,000 pieces from Egypt, the museum learned that every one of its 16 fragments of the famed Dead Sea Scrolls were, in fact, modern forgeries. But the biggest news was yet to come. At the time the new curator Jeffrey Kloha spoke to NPR in 2020, roughly 8,000 artifacts that Hobby Lobby had bought from dealers in the US, UK, and Israel were found to have questionable provenance that indicated they could have originated in Iraq and left the country without any associated paperwork, likely because they had been smuggled out. When asked if the pieces could have been looted from the National Museum of Iraq, Kloha responded, quote, we have no way to verify that. Over time, that number continued to grow. By mid-2021, the museum had identified as many as 12,000 pieces with unclear provenance originating in Iraq. On July 27, 2021, the U.S. and the Museum of the Bible handed over all 12,000 pieces of unclear Iraqi provenance to the Iraqi government as part of the largest ever repatriation of Iraqi antiquities. Speaking on the occasion of the repatriation, Iraqi Culture Minister Hassan Nadhim stated, this is not just about thousands of tablets coming back to Iraq again, it's about the Iraqi people. It restores not just the tablets, but the confidence of the Iraqi people by enhancing and supporting the Iraqi identity in these difficult times. Patty Gerstenblith, a professor at DePaul University that Steve Green had consulted over a decade ago to ask about the potential purchase of antiquities, cautioned that because the importance of the returned Iraqi antiquities was unknown, it was difficult to assess the repatriation in archaeological terms, but she hoped that the museum's internal audit would set an example for other museums to do the same. Speaking of other museums, what did that headline say again? Iraq reclaims 17,000 looted artifacts, its biggest ever repatriation. 17,000? But didn't the Museum of the Bible turn over 12,000 artifacts? Where did the other 5,000 come from? Cornell University? Yeah, if you thought this video was just going to be half an hour of me ragging on a small upstart museum run by a family with no experience with museums or antiquities, well, turns out the Ivy League itself isn't immune to making some of the same mistakes. A collection of 5,000 artifacts donated to Cornell in 2000 was found to have been looted from a different lost Sumerian city, Garshana, also believed to be near the site of Umma in southern Iraq. And this is really the crux of why I wanted to make this video. It's not just Hobby Lobby. It's not just the Museum of the Bible or Christie's. There's a crisis of provenance that stretches across the entire antiquities market. In fact, many studies over the last 2 decades have shown that a majority of the antiquities up for sale or in private collections are not accompanied by provenance information that clears them of suspicion of having been trafficked. And that's not even getting into cases where countries ask for antiquities to be returned and museums just refuse to return them, like the Benin bronzes or the Elgin marbles. This isn't just one story, it's countless stories spanning every country where antiquities are found, sold, or displayed. The illicit antiquities market gives profit incentives to destroy cultural heritage, specifically targeting poor and conflict prone countries with governments that don't have the resources to stop the looting, and bringing the value associated with the antiquities to wealthier countries that usually do have the means to protect their own heritage. Extremist groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda and organized crime syndicates can make money from selling their country's history to buyers willing to look the other way or who don't know how to do their due diligence. When these artifacts are separated from their historical sites, it makes the work of archaeologists all the more difficult and can make the history they would otherwise teach us harder and sometimes impossible to learn. Everyone deserves to learn their own culture's history no matter where they're from, no matter what kind of government they have, and no matter how rich or secure their country is. So, what's to be done? Well, first things first, if you have the money to buy antiquities, don't try to buy questionable artifacts with the intention of charitably sending them back to their country of origin. Smugglers and the dealers who sell smuggled antiquities don't change their behavior based on where an artifact ends up, only how much money they are able to make off of their sales. And bringing more money into that broken system does not fix it, it only incentivizes it to continue. If you're one of the rest of us who is not an active buyer and engages with the world of antiquities through visiting museums or even just seeing the ancient souvenirs your neighbor brought back from their trip to Turkey or Hong Kong, there are still important actions you can take to help reform the way that this market works. Many of the people and places who buy and sell antiquities only expect to be challenged on questions of provenance in high profile or public sales. We saw this with Christie's hesitation to put the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet up for auction. And part of the reason they think this is simply because most museum goers and friendly neighbors are simply not familiar with the concept of provenance, or that there's a real possibility a provenance could be incomplete or fake. If you have a particular favorite piece of art or an ancient artifact at your local museum or gallery, see if you can learn its provenance. And if you ever find yourself talking to a friendly docent or curator, ask them about the provenances of their collection. If they don't know off the top of their head, please don't assume it's because they're covering up for smuggled artifacts. Like I said, most museums assume visitors really aren't interested in stuff like this. But if they do start to hear questions about provenance, and they want to make their visitors happy, it hopefully encourages them to do the work of making their collection's provenances and any problems its provenances could have more transparent. Just a few months ago, in March 2024, New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art, home to a giant Jared Leto cat and Jared Leto's head, hired a head of provenance research for the first time ever. The move came in response to dozens of the Met's own antiquities being seized by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and returned to their own countries. Of course, the Met is one of the highest profile and most endowed museums in the world. But to their credit, even the Museum of the Bible seems to have maybe, finally, learned some lessons, bringing on a cultural heritage lawyer in 2017 to review all the museum's acquisitions. Will it be enough for either to avoid another embarrassment? I guess we'll see. It's going to take a long time for each and every museum to have the same sort of reckoning. But polite questions from the public can give well-meaning museums a chance to review their own policies before they find themselves with Homeland Security investigations showing up at their door to ask the same questions maybe a little less politely. Hey everyone, as you can probably tell, this is a new channel. This is my first foray into video essays, and as of now, this is all just a one-man job. So if you liked what you saw, let me know and please share. If not, please feel free to leave a constructive comment, especially on the sort of production side of things. And if you really, really hated it, then send it to all your friends and make me into a lolcow. I'll appreciate the engagement. Anyway, thank you all for watching.